In the 90s and the early 2000s, Chrysler was making some interesting choices with their rather unremarkable cars like the Dodge Intrepid and the Chrysler Concorde. You know the bunch. So when Chrysler introduced the 300 in 2004, it seriously shook the automotive world upside down. Today, let's put our glasses back on and take a deep dive and see why this American pop culture icon was, and I would say still is, one of the most anticipated sedans of the 2000s. This marks the first generation of the Chrysler 300 that we know today, which has actually just died. The first 300 was introduced as a concept car at the 2003 New York International Auto Show. It instantly became a hit because of its retro styling with its modern flair, which brought us the first ever production 300 in 2004 for the 2005 model year. If you didn't know, in the late 90s, Mercedes-Benz and Chrysler actually merged with the Daimler-Chrysler merger, which trickled components from the W211 E-Class and the W220 S-Class. They use the same 5-speed auto, some of the switchgear on the interior is the same. They even shared suspension and some other drivetrain components as big as the 4MATIC all-wheel drive system for the all-wheel drive models of these. This 300 in particular belongs to my friend Lewis and his family, and it's actually been in his family since 2005. It's a 2005 300C in brilliant black crystal, one of the best colors for these cars. They really fit in black. This one is also sitting at a hair over 45,000 miles, which makes it an absolute time capsule. The MSRP of a 300C like this back in '05 was just under $38,000. Knowing the price makes sense why this was such a popular car back in the day, because you got such a big engine under the hood, a premium driving experience, and all of that for under $40,000. Chrysler seemed that they really wanted to punch every single market in the face by giving the 300 5 trim levels and 4 different engine options. Trim started at the base, which was around $20,000, about the same price as a base to mid trim level Camry. We'd then move up to the Touring, Limited, 300C like this one, and then the almighty SRT8, which is an absolute powerhouse of a motor. But let's talk about the 300C. To me, this is one of the places that the 300C really does shine. The 5.7 liter Hemi V8. It's naturally aspirated. In this application, it makes 340 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. Super healthy numbers that get this 4,200 pound mammoth to 60 miles an hour in a hair over 5 seconds. This engine uses a cylinder deactivation system, also known as MDS. It can shut down up to 4 of the cylinders at a time to save gas mileage. Personally, I know some other brands that use cylinder deactivation systems, and they're not the best, so I can't say much about this, but these use a 5-speed automatic transmission, actually the same transmission that was in my W211 E-Class. Power only goes to the rear wheels in this one, but V6 and V8 models of the 300 could option all-wheel drive, which in this case, it was mechanically similar to Mercedes-Benz's 4MATIC all-wheel drive system. It offered a 32 front, 68 rear torque split. Me, myself, I knew about the Daimler-Chrysler merger, and I still didn't think that, oh, maybe this has some more Mercedes parts in it than I thought. I just find it really fascinating. Now, we already know that the 300 is clearly a big car, sitting at just under 197 inches long. I was surprised to find out, though, that it's just about the same length as the LS430 back in '05, and even the same length as the Toyota Avalon. Of course, the proportions are completely different because Chrysler was going for a retro look with the long hood and the chop-top design. It's a really handsome looking sedan, and it's sitting on, in this case, 17-inch chrome alloy wheels. The chrome really fits on this car with the chrome wheels, chrome door handles, the chrome window trim. It's a really classy looking car. Now, at least myself, I could find there's 2 ways to get into the trunk of your large personal sedan. You can push the button on the inside of the car, or you click the button on the key fob twice, and it pops open. But something that I would expect from a big sedan is a big trunk, and Chrysler does not disappoint, giving this 15.6 cubic feet of volume, and the second row even seems to fold down in a 60-40 split fashion. You could fit a few people in here. I think 2 full-size adults back here comfortably. You can't leave them in there though, because of course this car has that safety handle, but it's actually pretty roomy. And there's also roomy. Underneath the floor, I'm happy to announce that this does have a spare tire. It is a donut, but I'm glad this has a spare tire. And another Mercedes-Benz trait of this car is the battery in the trunk. There's terminals in the front to jump it, but I find that interesting. Now, one thing to note about getting into the rear of these is I wish that the rear doors open just a little bit wider. It would just make it a little bit easier for ingress and egress. But as I get in, the back seat is really nice and it looks like I'm sitting on a cloud, and it does feel like it. But as I close the door, nice solid thunk. Materials on the door, even in the back seat, are a soft touch. I like all the chrome elements, and this has wood trim in here. I don't know if it's real wood trim. As you can see, it's actually pretty roomy back here. I'm 5'9", and the driver's seat is in about the position that I would be sitting in, and I can fit my feet under the seat. I have decent amount of leg room, and headroom is really good too, because this one doesn't have a sunroof. At least in this one, it doesn't seem like creature comforts in the back seat go much farther than that. There's air vents back here, but this does not have a third zone for the climate. Surprisingly, this doesn't have an ashtray or cigarette lighters. The rear seats aren't heated. I know that is something that was big back then, but some of the full-size sedans back then offered heated rear seats. This does have an armrest, which is pretty soft, has decent stitching on the outsides, and of course, shallow cup holders with that little rubber grommet that holds the cups. I would say 3 people could sit abreast back here, but that center hump is pretty intrusive. But it's only because the car is rear-wheel drive. The driver's seat is where things get a little bit more plush and a little bit more comfortable. As I close the driver's door, nice solid thunk still. It feels really nice in here. And this, not this, but this is the key fob for these Chryslers back in the day. You know, you could find this key fob on a Jeep. I would expect some sort of smart key or push button start system, but I guess it makes sense because the people that wanted this car back when it was new wouldn't want any of that garbage anyway. But because it has a normal key, they certainly made the interior of this feel nicer, especially nicer than the junk they were making back in the 90s, like the Intrepid. All the trim fits nicely. There's no weird panel gaps in this. It actually feels like a decent built car. This one has a 4-spoke leather-wrapped steering wheel with that wood trim on the top of it. It has a decent amount of grip. It feels big. It makes me feel like I'm driving a big car when I use this wheel, the horn. Decent sounding horn. The steering wheel does have buttons on it. On the left side, those buttons control some of the functions for the trip computer and the little information display. It also controls some of the audio. On the right side, those buttons also go through the trip computer and that little information display, but some of the menus in it, and there's also volume on it as well. This does not have those behind the steering wheel buttons that some of the other Chryslers of this era had. Now, something I found funny, especially at the time, because I had my W211 E-Class and then I hopped into this a few months ago. For the wiper stock is the same, the cruise control stock is the same, even the stock for the steering wheel adjustment is the same. Now, speaking about that, this does have a power tilt and telescoping steering wheel, which is a pretty snazzy feature for back then. I appreciate that the driver and passenger side windows are one touch up and down. Now, as we look up to the gauges, we'll see that there's not a lot going on. There's definitely a retro look with the black font and the white background. I kind of like it. Again, there is that little information screen at the very top with the trip computer. As we move to the center, you can see this one has an analog clock. I always find that classy, but I never read cars with analog clocks. I'll always find the digital clock. Underneath that though, this one does not have the optional navigation system, so this one has the standard head unit with the CD changer, AM, FM, and I believe XM on some models, but I don't see an XM on this one. This one also uses the Boston premium audio system that Chrysler was using back in the day. It sounds pretty good, and when you're playing go-go music, like the national anthem of this car, it really sounds good. Underneath the head unit is the dual zone climate control. That's something that I would expect. It's dual zone and automatic. It's very simple to use. Thankfully, none of it is integrated into a screen. Now, since Chrysler doesn't believe in kids smoking in the rear seat, they do agree that people should smoke in the front seat. This has an ashtray with a cigarette lighter. It's something that I would expect back in the day, but this one hasn't even been used. On top of that, there's this little storage compartment where you could put your phone nowadays. There's also one next to the shifter. Now, you could see both the front seats have two-stage heating for the driver and passenger, and since I'm talking about the seats, we can continue to talk about them. They're actually just as comfortable, if not a little bit more comfortable, than the rear seats. The driver's seat is an 8-way unit, while the passenger seat is only 4-way. Now, between the seats, we have that WA580 5-speed automatic transmission. It's funny, it feels just like my W211 when I had it, when I put it in gear, the same type of slap shift to go up and down gears. When you put the car into reverse, this does not have a backup camera, but if you turn around or if you look into the rearview mirror, this does have a parking aid. It doesn't seem to beep, but just like some other cars, as you get closer to the obstacle, more lights will appear. Behind that, this has two cup holders. They're pretty small. They really won't fit modern sized drinks. Behind that, the armrest in the center is another place that I can see some cost cutting. It's not that soft. I'm not going to complain about it too much because it's better than hard touch plastic. It's just, it feels like a really hard vinyl, but no more nitpicking. Inside that though, there's plenty of storage to keep an air compressor and some other things. And there's also coin holders, pen holders, business card holders, note card holders in here, and they're all built in. They really thought that executives would be driving this, and they did. As we glance up, this has an auto-dimming rearview mirror. I'm glad to see that this has garage door home link and a sunglasses compartment with sunglasses in it. They're not even my sunglasses, but I'm disappointed and, well, I'm kind of bummed to see that this does not have a sunroof. I'm pretty sure it was optional, but I guess it makes sense why this one in particular doesn't have a sunroof as an option. So as you first set off in the 300, you'll notice that it's very smooth, especially this one has new tires on it, so it's extremely smooth. But we're going to get on to the power here and test out that 340 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. I'm not gonna lay into it because this thing I know will try to spin, but it's very quiet, and it's honestly not as fast as I thought it would be, but this isn't supposed to be a fast car. It's supposed to just take off and give smooth power. As I come in the corner, oh my! It kind of like, the front end really just doesn't communicate with you. The engine is also very quiet, which I'm surprised about as well. They did a good job. The ride is sublime as well. It's actually pretty composed. This road that I'm on normally makes boaty cars float, but this one actually feels pretty well purposed on this road. There's almost no road noise. It's actually really quiet in here. The only reason why I can hear a little bit of wind noise is this Miata gonna pass? But the only reason I can hear a little bit more wind noise is because this has those rain guards on it, which rain guards always make more noise. But this feels extremely refined, especially for the age, and I guess that's why a lot of people were shocked back in the day by this car, because you know, you see a Chrysler and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get a PT Cruiser, but then you hop into this and you're like, oh, this isn't that bad actually. Of course, it's not going to be as plush and as nice as an LS430 or the BMW 5 Series or 7 Series. Well, this isn't a 7 Series competitor, but the BMW 5 Series. It won't be as plush and as taut as those. This also feels pretty easy to drive, something that I have had to not get used to, but get acclimated to. I guess, I mean, those are the same words, just one is fancier, is the long dash. I really feel like I'm in a bunker. If you've driven something like the VW New Beetle from the 2000s or the Toyota FJ Cruiser, all those cars have long dashes and you really feel like you're sitting far away from the front end. But inside, I feel like I'm nicely cocooned. Throttle response is great. The transmission shifts a little bit differently in this than the Mercedes. They're both very smooth. I can almost never feel the shifts. I'll really say that it rides nice. The steering is pretty decent. It's on the more effortless side, and that gives you a little bit less road feel. Well, I don't really have much road feel. In that first corner that we saw, you could see you really just don't really know what the front wheels are doing. But this isn't the type of car to be needing that. I'm curious if the 300C SRT8 is any different in terms of steering. Like, this is not the type of car you're gonna be... That was floored. Thrashing on back roads. The brakes are pretty strong, but it handles well. You really don't have much road feel, so that's why it's not confidence inducing when you're taking corners quickly, but it does handle well. Wow. And it picks up speed. You don't feel the speed that you're going at. My goodness. But yeah, it's not really that confidence inspiring at higher speeds. And it's not supposed to be like that. So that's not me being like, oh man. It's actually pretty composed for being a larger sedan. Like on that bump, other cars you'd be like floating. This car just took the bump very nicely. They did a good job with the suspension, and I guess Mercedes-Benz is to not blame, but to thank for putting good suspension on this. Now, even though I myself am not the type of person to buy a Chrysler 300, I can say, especially with my time in it today, I really have come to appreciate it. It is a solid driving car, a solid feeling car, and it's actually quite attractive. And because of how well it rides and how nice the interior feels and how wonderful that 5.7 is, I really see why it shook up the market like a storm back then. I myself, and a lot of you that watch me, I'm sure you'd guess that I'd probably buy an LS430 if I was looking at something back then, which I would, but this is still a very nice car. And if you're looking at it even today, I recommend it. I also almost forgot to mention, this one in particular is also for sale. So if you're looking at one of these and fixing to buy one, you could potentially be the owner of a 45,000 mile black crystal silver Chrysler 300. I hope I said the make right. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if anyone is interested in the comments, or you could send me an email, which is in the description below. But I hope you all enjoyed this up-close and personal look at one of Chrysler's best cars ever. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you have one of these in the comments below and how it's treated you and how long have you had it. But enough of my Q&A time. Thank you all for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thank you again for 21,000 subscribers, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, peeps.